Music's off. That means we're starting. Hello, my name's Eric Schwartow. I'm the director of programming and operations for Decrit. I checked all you in, so I know each and every one of you by name. Thank you so much for coming. We're super excited. We have an amazing presentation. So I hope you're all ready to go. Feel free to if you need to use the restroom, grab a water. It's like we're not gonna do an intermission, but please, just know that everyone will see you leave and come back. So, think about that. But we're so happy to have you all, friends, family, fans. It's great to have you. And I'm gonna just give it over to Program Chair Molly Heinz.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chaos Agents, the class of 2024 Graduate Thesis Symposium. I'm Molly Heinz, as Eric said, and I'm the chair of the design, thank you, Trilby, I'm the chair of the Design Research, Writing, and Criticism Department here at School of Visual Arts. I'd like to give a special welcome to the family and friends of our MA candidates who are presenting this evening. And a big warm welcome back to our alums in the audience, of which there are quite a few. And then a virtual welcome to those joining us on the live stream. Thanks for tuning in. So I want to kick off with a few thank yous. First to the fantastic staff at the SVA Theater for helping us put on the show this evening. Yes, they are really pros. And it's really always a pleasure to work with you all. Thank you to the dear friend of the department, Chi Perlman from TED Talks, for helping our students polish the diamonds in the rough that were their presentations just 1 week ago. An extra big thanks go to our brilliant alum, Andrew McQuiston, who's here in the audience, for the design of our conference identity. And yes, thank you, Andrew. And the Chaos Agents publication, which is out in the lobby. And you can see it out there. Thank you to the editors of the New York Review of Architecture, some of whom are here this evening, who have been advising our students on editorial best practices the whole year and have helped them develop the publication over the last few months. And in particular, we appreciate the extra help over the past few weeks from copy editor Chloe Wyma. Brooke Vigut, please stand up. Where are you, Brooke? Oh, Brooke. Yes. Yay, Brooke. Brooke is a multi-talented alum from the class of 2022 and produced this evening's event, as well as managed all the communications leading up to it. So if you got an email from us, Brooke was behind it. Brooke, we really could not have done it without you, so thank you so much for all your excellent work and energy. And Eric Schwartow was, you just saw him standing up. I won't make you stand up again, Eric. But Eric worked with the students very closely on the publication as well as their presentations. And as he said, he's the voice you'll be hearing between presentations as our offstage MC this evening. So thank you for being there every step of the way, Eric. Yes, thank you, Eric. And a word of thanks to SVA President David Rhodes and Provost Christopher Cyphers. We are, as always, so grateful for your support. Even though we're a small program, our graduates go on to make a disproportionate amount of noise out in the world. Thank you to all of our guest speakers this year who came in with fresh ideas, and to our guest critics who came in with fresh eyes and ears when we most needed them. Looking at you, Ellen Chachanoff, thank you. But I'll reserve the platinum thank you for our fantastic faculty members who themselves are kind of proud parents this evening, and especially to this year's faculty thesis advisors, Alex DeLuz, Adam Harrison-Levy, and Anne Elizabeth Moore, who guided our students on their intensive research and writing journeys. You'll hear more about the thesis process from Alex DeLuz in just a moment. And I'd like to say here, for those who don't know, this is an intensive one-year master's program. But that year is an academic year, so it's more like 9 months. Our students treat their coursework as a full-time job. They start to think about their thesis topics amid a full load of seminar classes in the fall, and then focus on the thesis during the spring. So what you're seeing here tonight is the beginning of what we hope will be an ongoing and expanding body of work. But even if their research continues to evolve, These students now go back out into the world knowing how to do research and reporting, from archival work to interviews, how to analyze primary and secondary sources, and how to write for broad audiences. Most importantly, they understand the value of placing this research in context that turns it from straight-up reporting into design criticism. Notably, the architecture writer and critic Paul Goldberger said that reporting is the foundation of criticism, and at DCRIT we agree. Journalism and criticism have a symbiotic relationship, or another way to say it, to have a credible point of view, you need to have done your homework first. To understand our academic program and the event program you'll see this evening, it's also important to understand how we define design, and that is broadly. For our purposes, design is anything human-made intended to serve a function. So that means design is all around us, and we believe it is worthy of study in all its incarnations. So why is it valuable to look at the world through the lens of design? Because starting with design lets you ask the best questions, we would argue. With design, there is always a way in. For example, you can start with a question like, what material is this? Where does this come from? Who made this? How much were they paid? Who commissioned it? And one question always leads to another. And later, when you work to place this research into a larger cultural context, the questions get even more interesting and complicated and challenging. Ultimately, we want our students to try to answer what we refer to as the so what question. Why should we, that is the reader, or you here this evening, care about the subject at hand? I hope that each of the MA presentations you'll hear an attempt to answer that question. The student's title, Chaos Agents, captures the surreal state of current events, and in particular, the paradoxes, covert systems, and script-flipping stories that define the research of this class. The value of chaos agents, disruptors of convention or the status quo, is that they allow us to see and read our world in new ways. In this sense, our MA students themselves are disruptors, offering through their work a shift in perspective on an array of timely topics. Their project titles may not sound like what one would expect from a design research course, but all their subjects are considered through the lens of design. If you want to know more about a particular project or about the program in general after the presentations, we invite you to join us for drinks out in the lobby, where our MA candidates will be on hand to chat about their work, and you can check out a copy of the Chaos Agents class publication. So let's get going. We will not have an intermission, as Eric said, and we'll keep it pretty informal. If you go in and out, please try to do that between presentations if you can. And now I'd like to welcome to the stage Jennifer Cabot and John Key. You all come on up. Both of them, yes. Both of them are faculty members who have taught the class of 2024. John Key is a member of the class of 2021, I'm proud to say, in addition to being a designer, artist, and educator, and co-founder of the award-winning studio Morcos Key. His forthcoming and first book, Black, Queer, and Untold, a new archive of designers, artists, and trailblazers, will be published this fall by Levine Corrido, and John teaches a section of our Approaches to Design History class. Jennifer Cabot is a writer whose first book, The Eighth Moon, was released last week. Yes, yes. And her second book, Night Shining, will be published in 2025. Both books are published by Milkweed Editions. Jennifer's byline has appeared in Freeze, McSweeney's Bomb, the New York Review of Books, the Los Angeles Review of Books, The Believer, just to name a few. And her writing has been included in the collected volume of Best American Essays. Jennifer teaches our Research Writing 1 and 2 courses, also known respectively as From Description to the Short News Feature and the Long Review and Essay. So Jennifer and John are going to spend the next 15 minutes or so talking about the role of archival research in their work and how the past can illuminate the present. I will turn it over to you two.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Is this working? Yes.
Thank you for having me and John as your amuse-bouche for the evening. Congratulations, everybody. We're very excited to see your presentation.
Yes.
So we haven't rehearsed this. We don't have notes. This is super informal, and Brooke is going to wave her hands at us if we start talking too much, because John and I could go on for an hour.
Forever.
At least. Forever. And we thought we would first each tell you a little bit about our books because they're both basically using archives as ways to ground ourselves in the present. The short premise of my book is a woman moves to the Catskills, joins her fire department, discovers an 1845 socialist uprising, and time travels back to the past. No, that's a little bit, that's not quite it. Basically, my book is based on trying to understand the place I live and the values in that place. And in learning about this socialist uprising in the 1840s in my town as a way to understand the community I'm in, but also a way to understand that community in this moment of kind of Trumpism. And it involved a lot of archival research, which we're going to talk about. But in my town and in my fire department, most of the people I serve with, their forebears were part of that socialist uprising and are now very politically different, but that uprising looks a lot like the present tense moment too. Okay, now John.
So exciting. I can't wait to read it. So my book is called Black Queer Untold, a new archive of designers, artists, and trailblazers. I basically started this project in this program, in the Decrit program in 2021. So it's really excited to see almost 4 years later that it's about to be birthed out into the world. But my book is about looking at graphic design ephemera. So prints, posters, lithographs, newspaper clippings, magazines, and trying to find instances of Black queer histories that have been preserved or contained within those various objects. And I think in a big way for me as a Black queer graphic designer and artist, I was looking for examples of myself in history. I was looking for examples of other designers who looked like me in history. And also, I think that was definitely in contrast to being in design lectures at RISD and not hearing anything about anyone that looked like me or seeing any objects that looked like me. And so this is really it kind of has a lot of like historical, biographical, kind of hardcore facts, but it's also intertwined with my own personal narrative and my own kind of personal memories, kind of grounding how I'm navigating these spaces and these archives.
I have two things I want to say is like, one, I was John's teacher. Two, I was really floored by his research and all the ways, like, one of the things that I like about the program and where the program is right now is that a lot of people are using the archives and the research as ways to situate themselves in the world now and in the political world now. And that there's a real reason for doing research. And John's project, which was incredibly hard because it was also a pandemic and there were no archives to go to.
Like literally did the program on Zoom.
Yes. But also part of archival material is actually getting to touch it and that sort of like moment that transports you.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I will say that I like about the program is that the program is this one where you might be a student one year and then the professor the next. Like the program is actually one that is really embraces the paths that the people are in it are on. And I'm going to just say one other thing is like, I am also, I'm a socialist. So I was trying to find a history where I could situate myself in the place that I live so I didn't feel so foreign. And it actually started off by finding a census record where I saw a neighbor who in 1863 named their first child Lincoln.
Oh.
And this was at a time when the Civil War was very unpopular in New York State because of the draft. And I was like, and there was a lot of violence against Black people at that point, and orphanages were burnt. And I was like, oh, maybe I can belong to this land in this other way. And that was really important. So it's like we can all go to the archives for wild self-seeding purposes. And I had this idea that John and I could talk. I remember this image. Do you want to jump ahead to John's lithograph for a second? Go one ahead. So in our class, John was writing about this image of a trans woman. And I also have a lithograph that's about 9 years later, this sort of the centerpiece of my book. And I thought, oh, we have these lithographs in common. Let's talk about
Let's talk about them.
So yeah, tell
talk
people
about it a little bit.
tell people about your man monster who is not a monster at all.
Exactly. So Mary Jones is, again, I hate using the word first because it's kind of a ridiculous thing to say, but I would say like maybe the first reported, in quotes, or documented Black trans woman in New York. And I found the story about Mary Jones by literally Googling in old newspaper archives the word gay. And I was like, because I think one of my professors was like, when is the first time gay was found used in a newspaper? And I was like, huh. And so I Googled this. I was researching all these film strips of, newspaper clippings. And I found this phrase, gay deceiver. And so when this was written in 1835, gay at that moment meant sex worker oftentimes. It went from being happy to sex worker to being, homosexual like we know now. So I was like, what does it mean a deceiving sex worker? And then this name came up, Peter Sawali and Mary Jones. And then as I continued to research and dig and find out about this person, this lithograph came up. And this lithograph was made in 1836 by H.R. Robinson, and they titled it The Man Monster. So you can imagine why they did that. They have this, this Black trans woman that's been written up in newspapers that were stealing money from, people, was a sex worker, and was kind of a celebrity also. And was, talked about how beautiful she was in the newspapers, but also talked about how she was evil and was in disguise. And so I think there's something interesting about this lithograph where you have this really beautiful depiction of Mary Jones in this beautiful kind of white dress with the flowers kind of balling down. If you look at in her right hand, there's a wallet that is kind of telling you she steals wallets. But she has stolen wallets from multiple men over time. Maybe she keeps the money in this little round purse. And then you can also see how obviously the dress is so enveloping her whole body, so you can't see her shape. You can't, it's really disguising her. But then if you see how beautiful this is rendered at the top, and you see the typography where it says the man monster. So I think there is this interest, and I think it translates also into the text and the newspaper clippings of people loved her. People thought she was beautiful, but people also hated her. She confused and she aroused. She was, someone who was just trying to survive and became somehow, for some reason, the center of attention. And the last thing I would say about this lithograph is this is definitely not an accurate depiction of Mary Jones. This is probably a lithograph that they found of a fashionable white woman at that time and probably just inked her face black, and also probably just added these little ingredients with the wallets kind of hearkening to her story. But it's a really amazing story, and this was one of the first kind of artifacts that I found in my research when I was really looking at, obviously trans people existed in the 1800s and for the whole, beginning of time, but how were they actually captured or contained within, these print ephemera? So yeah.
Yeah, and so back then in 2021, John was doing these beautiful descriptions of this woman and how she was committed to print and the usage of that. And the other thing that I liked about John's project was that it didn't have to be linear, that it could be these flashpoints in time around which he could find the archives and find himself, and that the non-linearity was also important as these moments of kind of identity flashed up.
And speaking of non-linearity, I can't say that word, linearity, I can't say that. Well, your book, right, is you said it was written in first person present and kind of excavating all of these different histories throughout time.
So yeah, my book, I call it being polytemporal. Yes, basically. So for me, particularly with socialist uprisings, we often think the idea of progress is that time is over, and that those moments are defeated. And instead, I'm very interested in what does it mean if instead of a chronological linear time, we could look at those beads as ones that are still accessible to us.
Yes.
Which is, here, it's but it's also problematic because maybe you want to go back. There we go.
Yeah.
So the other thing is that I wanted to talk to John because basically this socialist uprising happened in drag. So these men were wearing dresses and they were fully clothed and they were wearing masks. And in fact, New York State outlawed disguises. It was illegal to wear disguises. It was illegal to gather in more than 2 or 3 people in disguises and masks. And that law was only overturned in 2020 because we were all wearing masks. It was also a law that was used to prosecute Occupy Wall Street. So here's this uprising in drag in a farmer's field. It was essentially a rent strike. And their dream was to redistribute land, to redistribute wealth, and there would be no centralized government. It would all be communal land. So it was this very kind of anarchist vision avant la lettre. But the other thing that's wild in the back of the image that you can't see, all the lawmen are wearing corsets. So I was just very interested in this, like, obviously they're wearing corsets because it's the fashion of the times, but to me, because obviously we see things as we are now, I would like to imagine into it all of these men kind of bending their gender. So this was why I wanted to be here with John, was just so that we could compare our 2 lithographs.
When was your lithograph made? When was this created?
So this lithograph was actually made in September 1845. So there was a shootout and a corral in the town next to mine in August of 1845. And this lithograph is actually a kind of quasi-legal document. Like, all the law guys signed it because the undersheriff was shot and killed. So it's like, so it says the death of Osmond Steele, and it's signed by the survivors. So it was working in a certain way, and it's also the only document of what happened there.
I mean, this is amazing. I mean, this is literally proof that this happened. These people existed, who died, who survived, who won. I love this.
Yeah, and then there are the horses that get shot, and basically they're trying to auction off 6 cows. That was the deal.
The other question I had about this, I think this lithograph, like my lithograph is so focused on the figure, and your lithograph is obviously the figure and the land, and just quickly kind of, like we talked about this, quickly going through some of the writing and reviews about your book, it is so about the landscape, it is so about, you know, these histories that have been imbued there. So, I don't know, talk about that.
Well, I mean, if you're going to be polytemporal, then like land can exist in all these ways. Like, I'm very interested in the ways, like, you know, there are a lot of old stone walls. Those rocks can hold time. Lichen can hold time. Trees hold time. And that if you were in a place, like you probably found as you started to do research, that research starts to vibrate into your time and sense of place and the way you move through it. So... And for me, the land was a particular thing that held time. But I will also say about where I live, it is where continents split apart originally as what became Africa split from what is now considered North America. But it is also where the first trees on Earth emerged 380 million years ago.
Wow.
So, you know, I was like all of the time in the land. Yes. Yeah. Anything else?
Oh, five.
We've got 5 minutes.
Okay, great. I love it. I don't know. Tell us about like writing this book. How long did it take you to write it? What was the process?
It took about, well, because there are 2 linked books, it took about 10 years. And it was like a lot of weird research. I mean, you know, how long did it take you to write your book?
Like 4.5 years, so not as long.
Yeah, but it was probably sitting in your brain for longer than that.
It was, definitely. Because the very first artifact that I found, like pre the program, was this 1926 Fire magazine.
Can we talk about Fire for a second?
Let's just talk about it for 1 second. It's cool. So if you don't know Fire magazine, it was made in 1926 in Harlem by this group of artists and designers called the Niggerati that was spearheaded by Wallace Thurman and featured, you know, the greats like Langston Hughes or Neil Hurston, all these amazing people. But one of the main reasons why it's really important to me is that it was the first time in American history that a story about a Black gay like lover was published, and it was published by Richard Bruce Nugent, who was who worked at this hotel and fell in love with the pretty Latino boy that worked down the hallway, and they had a loving relationship, and it's like all based off of true stories, and so it's written in like this stream of consciousness, kind of sexy, lyrical verse. And so, yeah, and that was the very first thing of like, you know, for me, that was like finding this story 100 years ago about Black queer people. And that was kind of the exciting thing that was, sparked me to look further back and also to see what else is around.
Totally. And also to be a person where it's like, you know, you're RISD and there's no you represented
Yeah.
in the world of design, to start to find antecedents for those stories.
Absolutely, because people genuinely make you feel as if, you know, you weren't there. There is nothing that you know, Black queer people contributed to design history, and we obviously know that's just not true. And that can be said about any type of, you know, various types of intersections of identities. Is that, you know, people have been making work, people have been existing, people have been crafting and telling their stories, you know, since the beginning of time.
And having a history for that is like grounding. So instead of having to be a first, one is in a lineage.
Exactly.
And that's super empowering.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, there we go.
I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
And also thank you for entertaining us, letting us be here, like, and indulging our little conversation.
Yes,
Yeah.
thanks for listening.
Thank you, guys.
Give it up one more time for Jennifer and John. I really want a lithograph now. Everyone needs a lithograph in this department. Next up, we have the introduction to thesis presenters, which our lead thesis advisor, Alex Deleuze, will introduce. I think I need to rework that sentence, but welcome, Alex.
Thanks. Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you all, family, friends, alums. Please put your hands together for the graduating class of 2024. It's been a real pleasure and honor to work with you all this year. So thank you for that. What if I told you that tumbler locks, the kind that you might find on your gym locker, accelerated the rise of finance capitalism? Or, for example, that trench coats contributed to the struggle for gender equality? Or the use of sod lawns leads to obesity? Locks, coats, and lawns are all familiar products of design. Now, you may or may not agree with these claims, but perhaps they make you a little bit more curious about what design actually does in the world. We're going to hear more about coffee later, but does anybody in the audience know how to read the grinds in a Turkish coffee? No. It's, yes. It's like reading the tea leaves. It's like deciphering the chaos. To ask questions about design is to ask how the grind of reality makes any freaking sense. How it all holds together, or if it doesn't, what we can make from the rifts in the mess. And our graduates know all about asking questions. Today, you're going to hear from 6 amazing researchers who have completed 9 months of dense, fast-paced, sometimes totally unpredictable coursework in design research, writing, and criticism. They've dipped into the journalist toolkit. They've wrenched their way to archives, screwed around with in-depth interviews, and hammered away at writing. You get the drift. That is a terrible use of extending a metaphor. They've been hunting design, decoding products in diverse forms, as well as the tangle of people, places, processes, and politics. These are all the living fibers of design. Today, you're going to get a glimpse of multifaceted research. To complete the master's degree in our program, candidates produce a podcast and a publishable article based on original research. We consider this the portfolio. And it is backed by a dossier built over 2 semesters, which is rich in facts at this point, discoveries, ideas, false starts, dead ends, and a lot of self-reflection. The whole thing amounts to a veritable garden of forking paths. Don't worry though, today you're going to get a really good glimpse, although only partial. And you'll leave here pondering, I guarantee. Some of the things you might be asking yourselves when you leave are, why are and how are institutional precincts, whether cultural or religious, marshaled into global affairs and into crises by design? How does food, by design, lead us to uncanny, perhaps unsavory realizations about history and about our own identities? How is an American symbol, the interstate highway system, becoming a battleground for the rights of women and for democracy? What do violence and branding have in common? Do t-shirts and taglines make all the bad feelings go away? Yep, it's pretty good stuff. Big ideas. But let me ask you, what makes compelling journalism for you? You're probably thinking something I can relate to. We are always asking our candidates, now our peers, why should a reader care? A compelling story wins hearts and minds. All of these researchers have rooted their work in their own life experiences, and the results speak for themselves. As we can probably agree, it's not easy getting a critical distance on oneself, is it? But these candidates have done just that and succeeded beautifully. Of the many possible paths these researchers have uncovered, we feel pretty confident. More than a few lead to futures that you'll want to read about. So sit back and enjoy. Congratulations, class of 2024.
No one wanted to sit near the woman at the back of the bus, talking to herself or some disembodied beings. Many of the other riders openly, unkindly made fun of her and complained to the bus driver, creating a narrative that she stank and was crazy. The bus driver, a bigger chaos agent, refused to drive the bus and, after 10 minutes, ordered us all off and drove away to New Jersey sans passengers. It was the Weehawken version of Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, but on wheels. I didn't know what to say, but was mad at myself for not saying anything. We all stood waiting for a new bus as the talking woman wandered away, ticket in hand.
A quick explainer, just we have alumni submitted chaos agents, everyday chaos agents, which are included in the publication. So there'll be interstitial moments where we'll have our alumni contributors. So next up we have our first presenter, Allison Hewitt Ward, presenting Food Fights, A History of Vandalism as Activism in Art Museums.
Hi. My name is Allison Hewitt Ward. I'm an art critic and faculty member here at the School of Visual Arts and now an MA holder in design criticism. 15 years ago, I saw David Graeber, the anarchist sociologist, give a talk at this very podium, and he began by asking, why don't we have flying cars? Why did the Jetsons not become reality? Why did that promise of a future where robots did the dishes for us not come to pass? Capitalism is a large part of that answer, of course. But that concept of broken promises and the self-undermining character of society has stuck with me ever since, which makes it very satisfying to speak at this podium myself. They're asking which is more important, art or food? Since two members of activist group Just Stop Oil splashed a can of Heinz tomato soup on a Van Gogh sunflower painting at London's National Gallery on October 14th, 2022, at least 20 artworks in Europe and North America have been similarly ambushed, usually with foodstuffs, sometimes with paint. This is in the name of climate activism. Each national group has a different demand. Here in the United States, they demand that Biden declare a climate emergency and rally government forces to that. What that would actually mean, they're a little less clear on. All of the artworks that they choose to efface are well known, kitschified by a century of photographic reproduction. I'm showing you this to shock you. They're shocking. And to open up a consideration of museums in a different way. Violence against museums is jarring for the same reason that the notion of shooting a puppy is more viscerally upsetting than shooting a person. What did the puppy do? To most of the public, museums fall somewhere on the spectrum between irrelevance, school field trips, and ideally a pleasant afternoon, more anodyne than adversarial. Opinions of and about art museums are not worth much in a world of real suffering and real problems and real crises, my own included. But as horizons of political possibility recede, denying human beings a meaningful say in our own future, museums become playhouses for the political contentions that cannot be made in the domain of politics. For that purpose, they make a very poor showing. A Dutch museum director recently said, "The museum is built on a lie. It's built on identity that comes from a highly specific identity that is white, male, heterosexual, ableist, highly educated, wealthy, and so on. But the museum was not built on a lie. It was built on a promise that languished unfulfilled until its concept took on the cruel grimace of Dorian Gray's portrait. Our present has failed to fulfill that promise the same way it's failed to deliver us flying cars." So what was that promise? It was formed in the French Revolution at the end of the 18th century. This is a rendering of the future Grand Gallery of the Musée du Louvre by the artist Hubert Robert. In the French Revolution, the bourgeoisie, the third estate, overthrew the first and second estates, the aristocracy and the church, which left them with a bunch of stuff and buildings, and they had to do something with it. And while there was an initial impulse to destroy it because of what it represented, which was everything that they overthrew, everything that dominated and oppressed them, several key figures came out to save these items and put them in something that would become the first public museum. In this rendering by Robert, it fades into a utopian single-point hazy eternity. He's bothered to depict people of distinctly different classes and colors in his museum, and the sealed-off character gives it a laboratory sense that we might be able to figure out a better way to live in this space. The artist Jacques-Louis David actually lived in the Louvre while they were converting it from a palace to a museum, and was one of the main architects of the project. He would write, "All individuals useful to society will be joined together as one. You will see the president of the executive committee in step with the blacksmith, the mayor with his sash besides the butcher or the mason, the black African who differs only in color next to the white European." David made this famous drawing of the tennis court oath, which was the moment of rupture of the French Revolution in 1789. And I want to point out a key figure at the very center here. This is the Abbé Henri Grégoire. You can tell that over the weekend I discovered that you can do little cutouts on Keynote. It's really, really cool work, if I may say so myself. So you can see him with his arms around these two other men, uniting them. Grégoire's career began, he rose to national fame when he won an essay contest writing about the emancipation of the Jews in France. He was a vocal and leading supporter of the Haitian Revolution and the abolition of slavery in the French Empire. He also invented vandalism. Well, he invented the word. He said, "I coined the word to kill the thing." The 20th century is very sorry, and 21st century. But to him, the prohibition of vandalism, killing vandalism, was a central part of the Project of Freedom. It wasn't totally out of step with his work on emancipation of peoples, because for Gregoire, freedom in a free society is desirable, and in order to be free, you have to be free to create. And in order to be free to create, you can't have your stuff destroyed as soon as you make it. You can't have one individual decide that they know best what deserves to exist and what doesn't, or even a government. Freedom requires free creation. On the opening day of the Louvre, on the first anniversary of the complete toppling of the monarchy, David designed this festival where citizens moved around Paris to various stations that appropriated the symbolism of Egypt and the classical world, and even some Catholic imagery. They would do things like drink from the teat of Republican spirit to wash themselves clean of the Ancien Regime. The French Revolution was really kooky. And before they were deposited at the Louvre, the First French Republic established the museum as a life-size utopia that pointed toward the future. In the Second Empire, it took on a nationalist character pointing towards the past. It became guardian of the material culture that was crumbling in the industrial age. Across the pond, American museums mimicked the architecture. They appropriated the design of their European counterparts. They literally imported culture, but had little of their successors' revolutionary flair. Transformative politics throughout the 19th century and into the 20th paid little attention to museums. They had a world to win. They were seizing states. Museums became sites of struggle for the New Left in the 1960s. Reeling from the failure of the 1917 Russian Revolution and the catastrophe of fascism, the New Left substituted students for the proletariat as the revolutionary subject, and cultural institutions for the state as their sites of struggle. Museum transformations would no longer follow revolution. They would be its vanguard. This is Robert Morris leading the art strike in 1970, where activists began to connect larger social problems to the funding and representation that exists in museums. The strategy has yet to succeed. Activists petition museums for justice denied by reality. A painting must be evacuated, a board member must be nixed, an apology must be made, a political statement must be issued. In 2019, activists rallied around the Whitney Museum's what they called tear gas biennial for the expulsion of board member Warren Kanders. He was a stakeholder in a company that produced tear gas that was used in Gaza. Kanders did eventually resign, but the tear gas production never stopped. And as we've seen, this situation has gotten considerably worse. Protests led by Nan Golden at museums around the world led to the removal of the name of the Sattler family from galleries. The Sattlers pretty much caused the opioid crisis. And it did put some public pressure into prosecuting the Sattlers, but most of the fines that they were made to pay and things that they were made to give up were just reinvested in shell companies. So what of the supers? They are appropriating this history of museums as sites of protest for things that don't apparently have anything to do with museums. But they're really something new for two reasons. Their scripted theatrical faux effacement of works of art in art museums is a new entry in the lexicon of museum protest. It doesn't bother to really link what they're effacing with what they have a problem with. You know, it's oil paintings, but you know, they're not made with crude oil. It's the spectacular performative politics of the social media age, mimed in 3 dimensions before returning to its natural 2D habitat of likes and shares. Activists play the drama of the toddler on the high chair, flinging pureed food in anger, then gluing themselves to the object of rage and desire, mommy. The efficacy, if there is any, of the gesture relies both on cited museum gallery and dispersed image. Without museum goers, phone in hand with camera ready, it would be a wasted effort. Museums have spent the past decade rolling back no photos policies and developing social media strategies. Well, it seems they work very well. So as protest design, this is extremely effective at getting media attention. This was on the evening news all over the world. But it's very bad at gaining support for their goals. We now have multiple polls showing how much people hate this. People support climate change measures less after these. In this one, they pulled with the ATSE's Democrats and Republicans. You can see that the one thing that crosses the American political divide that we can all agree on is that we really hate the supers. So if you have like an estranged Republican uncle and you want to reconnect, you can call him and talk about this. You'll agree. But to be a little more serious, and to return to this beautiful hazy utopia, T.J. Clark wrote that the role of modernism was to, quote, make the endlessness of the ending bearable by time and again imagining it had taken place. Rather than imagining an ending of the unbearable end of history, the supers act it out, performing time and time and again a passion play of finitude. They never actually destroy the paintings. They only choose artworks protected by glass. But after each performance, the tomb opens and the task of humanity remains. The performance of politics in museums is dually flawed. First, these activities re-entrench the stalemate of the present by providing false relief and anesthetic from the real discontents that only continue to fester. Second, by plunging museums into the world of practical life, the performances obscure this utopian character of museums, what they might have been, the promise that was unfulfilled, and flatten their history onto a matrix of present discontents. Climate change deserves a more serious response. Humanity deserves better. Our task is to address climate change, but also to seize the freedom that was imagined by figures like Grégoire and David. It deserves more than a can of soup. Thank you.
Give it up one more time for Allison. Yeah.
A chirping alarm designed to alert when the fridge or freezer door is not securely shut wreaks havoc when it misunderstands the signals. The doors are clearly closed, yet the chirping continues until we heed its plea. Open and firmly close the refrigerator door, then the freezer. Finally, it receives the message and stops interrupting.
Glitter. Tiny flecks of celebration born from a cattle rancher's hands. Taking center stage at a party, then moonlighting as forensic evidence, this herpes of arts and crafts sticks to everything it touches. Beyond a joyful and omnipresent exterior, the luster is rife with mystery. Somewhere in New Jersey, birthplace of most of America's glitter, its producers hold its manufacturing and primary consumers under padlocked NDAs to this day. Though we may never know why, it will always be found giving a clandestine wink from the carpet long after the sun rises.
Okay, now we're all thinking about herpes of arts and crafts. Next up we have AJ Kushner presenting The Rights at Manitoga, Reverse Queering American Modern Domesticity.
For the better part of the 20th century, Mary and Russell Wright were a pioneering industrial design couple whose innovative furniture, housewares, and lifestyle advice helped shape the aesthetic of and set the tone for 20th century American domestic life. Their multi-decade marriage and close creative partnership birthed numerous icons of American design history. From modernist furniture lines with Conant Ball, their colorful ceramic dinnerware sets, to their best-selling Guide to Easier Living, published in 1950. My interest in their legacy was piqued after a guided tour of Manitoga, their 75-acre house and studio in upstate New York, which includes a gallery featuring dozens of their domestic designs. But after visiting, I was surprised to learn from Jennifer Cabot that Mary was not the only love of Russell's life. In fact, she died long before the construction at Manitoga even began. In 2006, the New York Times printed that after Mary's premature death in 1952, Russell had a, quote, equally satisfying romantic relationship with Joe Chapman, a graphic designer living in the town adjacent to Manitoga. In an interview in 2022, Joe confirmed that they were out only to close friends, and the social and political environment of the 60s and 70s prevented them from living openly. The revelation that Russell Wright had a male lover for the last 12 years of his life inspired me to reevaluate both his and Mary's careers from a queer perspective. This led to a deeper look into Manitoga, the Hudson Valley dream retreat of Mary and Russell, but which the two men enlivened until Russell's death in 1976. The house, which Russell named Dragon Rock, is an experiment in integrating architecture within its natural environment and harmonizing industrial and organic materials and forms. It is a monument to the Wright's ethos of fluid expression and transcendent connections. Russell and Mary first met in 1927 in their early 20s at the Maverick Art Colony outside of Woodstock, New York. Russell designed sets and costumes for the theater, and Mary apprenticed for an avant-garde sculptor. It was a utopian community in the woods, where artists like Isamu Noguchi and Alexander Archipenko flocked to be with like-minded hedonists and to resist the rapid industrialization of the 20th century. The photographs of campfires, guitars, body paint, masks, and cross-dressing could easily be mistaken as documents of the more infamous Woodstock of 1969. But as it was the 20s, there is something cabaret-like about these images of free spirits, thrusting unencumbered limbs into fresh space. At the end of the summer, Mary and Russell eloped. The culture of the Roaring Twenties set the tone at Woodstock. Many of Manhattan's neighborhoods had vibrant queer communities with lively nightlifes and prominent creative figures. While not risk-free, queerness and queer communities were visible and largely tolerated, particularly in the theater scenes that Russell and Mary were part of. This image is of a downtown drag show from the period. It was a form of entertainment that drew a remarkably diverse audience than one might think for the time. But the Great Depression of 1929 ushered in conservative social changes. Draconian regulations against immorality and economic devastation dampened the entertainment industry and queer social life. Russell and Mary pivoted from designing for stage productions to designing products for the home. Early work, such as the informal serving accessories line from 1930, are notable for being some of the first decorative and functional consumer products made from inexpensive aluminum. As with their line of circus animal figurines, we can see the melding of modernist industrial metals with theatrical, playful forms. And natural accents, such as wooden knobs or cork handles, lend a softening effect to help ease the user into handling an unfamiliar material. According to George Nelson of Herman Miller, Russell was the person most responsible for the shift in the taste towards modern in the 1930s. That's right, just Russell. Even though he and Mary were design collaborators, it was her idea to make Russell's the brand's name. More gregarious, she performed product demonstrations at luxury department stores, distributed marketing materials, published how-to articles in ladies' magazines, and did interviews on the radio, all in which she gave Mr. Wright credit for their concepts and designs. Arguably, by serving as spokeswoman for her husband, Mary reinforced their model of heterosexuality, heading off concerns about manliness despite his work in a realm of femininity. In 1939, they introduced American Modern, a dinnerware set in colorful glazes manufactured by the Steubenville Pottery Company. As with the earlier aluminum line, the pieces were intended for versatile use and casual occasions like buffet dinners and picnics, and one could purchase a single item rather than the entire set, which was the norm at the time. Functional innovations included rimless plates, which could be stacked to save space, serving pieces that could go safely into the oven, and molded dividers separating different foods on a single platter. American Modern and its competitor Fiesta, manufactured by Homer Laughlin, were two of the earliest non-white, solid-colored dinnerware collections available, though the former's colors were more nature-derived and its shapes more organic than the garish Fiesta ware. Its designer, a traditional ceramicist named Frederick Hurton Reed, added Art Deco-inspired concentric circles to the surface, in part to soften the severity of the color. In the Wright's designs, there are no sharp lines, only gentle curves, and some pieces are elongated or curved in such a way as to suggest movement. Whimsical and flamboyant, some figures have an obvious corporeality. One critic noted that the line had qualities of nudity and chi-chi color. Nevertheless, through the 1950s, the original production line sold over 200 pieces. All this fluidity and softness was part of their easier living philosophy, which they compiled in the book The Guide to Easier Living, a handbook for how to better manage all aspects of domestic life, like open plan room design, informal buffet-style entertaining, one-pot meals, and systematized cleaning and maintenance. Tasks are delegated to each family member, including children, with an emphasis on an equitable distribution of labor. The many assignments conform to gender stereotyping, such as men and boys working in the yard and women and girls polishing silver. The entire family tackles the same room or category of chore together. When looking in the archives, I found a draft version of the book that is even more forceful about this. The American male must learn to share in the responsibility of maintaining the house and raising the children, must learn that it is not beneath his dignity to push a broom or a baby carriage, and American women must learn that the old concept of the home as a place where she rules and expresses herself to the exclusion of all others does not belong in this new world. Encourage your husband to enter any phase of home life that interests him. Isn't a good family life more important than keeping up with Mrs. Jones? Mary passed away in 1952, and Russell spent the next decade working on building their Manitoga retreat home, which they named Dragon Rock. It was to be their personal manifestation of their easier living philosophy, but experimental and more integrated with the natural environment. In 1964, Russell met Joe Chapman, a local graphic designer and single father. For the following decade, Joe assisted Russell in realizing his vision for Manitoga's landscape. Though they were not open as a couple at a time, I discovered that Joe was integral in designing and managing the landscape of Manitoga. He designed a dozen woodland paths that coursed along the land's existing topography. Like a meditation, each trail was named and drawn to highlight a particular time of day, season, or natural feature. Certain features are named after important individuals. Mary's Meadow is the large clearing that overlooks the pond and is an ideal picnic spot. But as with Mary, Russell has immortalized their relationship in the woodlands of Manitoga in a clearing called Joe's Room. Thinking about this outdoor room, the site of Russell's favorite garden, I think about how queerness reaches across space, conjures the ephemeral, unfolding the layers of time underneath. I think about how Mary and Russell's work and philosophy incurred deeper connections with nature and upended rigid structures of domestic life. I think about Joe, who is still alive, in his 90s, and still regularly walks the woodland paths. Thank you.
Congratulations, AJ.
The @Subway Creatures Instagram account is an example of one last bit of social media keeping me on a platform. It's disgusting. Both the content, rats dragging whole pizza slices, children licking subway poles, very questionable footwear, and the fact that it keeps me on Insta, but it's also wonderful. The ocean as a chaos agent has proven its power this past winter, eroding bluffs, eliminating dunes, causing significant damage to the natural and built environments in Montauk. While proactive coastal planning is underway to restore the dunes and mitigate further erosion, the larger issues of adaptation and denial of climate change remain unaddressed and require urgent attention as our coastline becomes more vulnerable every year.
Okay, next up we have Saprila Putri Anindita presenting Java Beyond the Cup, Coffee, Culture, and Community in Indonesia.
Hello, my name is April. I'm from Indonesia, specifically from Java Island. Okay, give me a plus if you know where Java Island exactly is. Okay, you guys are so smart. You should present something tonight. And for those of you who don't know where Java is, Java located in southern part of Indonesia. It's on the west part of Bali Island. Okay, like some of you maybe didn't know Java, but nobody be like, oh, okay. And yeah, in fact, Java Island is the most populated island in the world. Even 56.7% of Indonesian population are there. And I just found out one time here that Java is also a term for coffee as well. And turns out, in the past, Javanese and Sundanese once came at the World's Fair in Chicago in 1893. And from this fair, the word Java as beverage widespread. At the time, the Dutch opened Java Village to boost coffee export to the US and displaying our people, our buildings, and our culture. Under Dutch colonialism, Java Coffee was once the biggest coffee supplier in the world. It was mainly women who worked in the coffee plantation, from harvesting, transporting to facilities, handpicking the best beans. Women did all of it, even underage girl like this. As a Javanese girl, I grew up with the stereotype that women are only good in the kitchen and bed. But turns out we are also good at being hyper-exploited peasant. There are 25 buildings in the Java Village, including the theater where our music and performances were shown, and a lunchroom to sell a cup of Java coffee and tea. But still, even the Americans already meet the Javanese in Chicago. They still have no idea where Java is. Even the most well-known and one of my favorite TV show, Seinfeld, I watched season 3, episode 2. I was surprised. He wrongly located Krakatoa Mountain. He said, "Those brave Krakatoans east of Java." But I'm sorry, Jerry, Mount Krakatoa located in west of Java. This is also means so far for Americans, Java was an abstract idea, not a real place. And what a shame not a lot of people here knew that the word Java as coffee originally refers to my island, especially New Yorkers. You guys are obsessed with coffee. As if you're not a functional human being if you haven't had your morning coffee yet. Some of you can talk, work, or think if caffeine is not yet injected into your bloodstream. I mean, is this how big cities treat their people? Giving them dreams to hustle and then never let them to sleep? Besides New Yorker endless love for coffee, they love this dish too. It's pad thai from Thailand. And me too. I'm more loyal to Thai restaurant. It's cheaper than Indonesian restaurant. Right? Yeah, my Indonesian friends verified it. And yeah, maybe I'm a bad Indonesian, but I'm not bad at math. But how Thailand could make their restaurants so reliable and cheap and widely known, even making people immediately refer pad thai to the country, which is something that Java as coffee needs. Turns out what Thailand did was a strategic movement called gastro-diplomacy. The Thai government started the Global Thai Program in 2002, which 22 years ago, supporting Thai entrepreneurs to open restaurants overseas by setting up policies to give easy access to loans, importing products, and hiring Thai chefs. Indonesia started gastro-diplomacy recently in 2021 called Indonesia Spice Up the World. I'm to open more restaurants overseas and export more spices. But why export something new when we have coffee all along? We have our own coffee culture, and it's huge. For instance, Indonesia has a distinct way to serve our coffee, and it's called kopi tubruk. We mix our coffee grounds, cane sugar, and hot water into a cup. Hashtag no filter, as they said. Some cities in Indonesia have their specialties. In Yogyakarta, coffee is served with a burning charcoal called kopi jos. In Lampung, they put a piece of durian fruit into their coffee. In Ambon, their black coffee is boiled with the ginger, clove, cinnamon, lemongrass, and sugar named kopi rarobang. And the only rules Indonesians have about enjoying coffee is it should be black, strong, steaming hot, and served exclusively for men. In some Indonesian village, men are still automatically served coffee and women are served tea. And me, a young lady, drinking a cup of black coffee, Indonesian will make fun of me and say that I've turned into an old man. And this is where Indonesian men drink their coffee, warung kopi or warkop for short. It's a small traditional coffee shop in a hut. They sell snacks, instant noodles, and instant coffee. And it's equivalent of a New York City bodega, but with places to sit. Warkop is also associated with low-class people. To the extreme, everything for low class are always color-coded with green color, this green. Indonesians, see? Only Indonesians know that. Indonesians make fun of it as hijau miskin or poor green. But surprise, surprise, in Indonesia, there's other green associated with coffee as well, but in contrast, only for the elites. It's Starbucks green. In 2002, Indonesia experienced a reverse gastro-diplomacy. Starbucks introduced American coffee to Indonesian, which is where their Java came from. Javanese would call this situation as nguyahi segoro, or salting the sea. Starbucks opened their first shop at one of the prestigious mall in Jakarta, Plaza Indonesia. Starbucks was really exclusive back then. Many local entrepreneurs began opening their own affordable coffee shop to give an alternative option for people who can afford Starbucks, but at the same time, they want to experience the same level of comfort as Starbucks. These entrepreneurs will start their business from their garage, house, or an abandoned building. Also, in a way, creates a middle ground between the high-end coffee brand and warkop. The good side from the local coffee shop is now Indonesian women could drink coffee too. And yes, black one as well. The local coffee shop trend in Indonesia started around 2015. It's all because of philosophy coffee. It was proved as the inflection point of the coffee shop trend by the Ministry of Creative Economy. Philosophy coffee started not as a coffee brand, but it started as a book by Dewi Lestari. In 2015, the book became a movie directed by Angga Dwi Sasongko. It tells a story about two characters, Ben and Jody, running their artisan coffee shop in Jakarta. The movie went well. It has sequel, a series, even a spin-off. In one of his interviews, Angga Sasongko shares, during Philosophy Coffee first movie, he did a promotional roadshow. He went to a city outside Jakarta and struggled to find a local coffee shop, but not warung kopi. 2 years later, in the same exact city, to promote the sequel of the movie, he found that at least 300 coffee shops had opened. What Philosophy Coffee, Starbucks, and local coffee shop offer is actually not only coffee, but also an experience. Alan Lupton called this as experience economy. A coffee shop could simulate desires, from the smells, sounds, and social activities around it. It is a crafted theatrical move within an environment to sell a simple commodity, a cup of coffee. If Starbucks came to Indonesia only for the elites, Java Coffee came to the US with the honesty of Javanese and Sundanese people in a full immersive cultural experience at the World's Fair in Chicago. The exhibition went well for the Dutch. Java Village ended as the most profitable within Mid-Flight Plaza exhibitor. And the number of Java Coffee export after the expo are increasing too. Now we learn that, turns out, when colonialism meets cultural appropriation, it's a great business recipe. The visitors drew conclusions from the exhibit that Javanese are calm, relaxed, even content. They were amazed by Javanese way of living and reviewed Java Village as one of the most genuine exhibits, and nicknaming us as the Pearl of the East. For Indonesian, coffee is a moment of slowing down. We have another cultural expression, urip mung mampir ngombe, translates life is a stop to grab a drink, which also means our existence on this earth is a brief stop to drink and then leave. I think New Yorkers need to experience that in their coffee routine. I hope after this, when you drink your coffee, especially Java coffee, You'll think about my people and treat your coffee as a moment to stop and relax. A cup of coffee won't disturb whatever you're chasing now. If it's meant for you, it will be there for you. If you have any question or response, please feel free to reach out. My name is Aprila. Thank you.
Congratulations, Saprila.
Injecting a quadrupedal disruption into public space, the robotic dog is a ghost metastasizing an uncanny AI vision. No longer caged within academia, it has been equipped through government-subsidized modularity, unleashing new modes of surveillance, intimidation, and mechanical violence. Spot, or the QUGV ground drone, is incomparable to the living, breathing, sentient companion we call best friend, and undeserving of its deceptive sobriquet.
Next up, we have Elle Stern, who will be off stage presenting Weaponized Letters, the role of ZOV in the Russo-Ukrainian War. Woo! Give it up for Elle.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elle Stern, and today I'll present some findings from my research on the role of ZO and V in the Russia-Ukraine war. No war is possible without weapons. When you hear the word weapon, you probably imagine something like this. But during my research, I've come to believe that in the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, the weapons can look like this, and this. These three symbols are designed to construct a collective militaristic identity and to justify and enable war ideologically. How so? The initial references to the Z surfaced in the global media as Russian forces breached the Ukrainian border in February 2022. This was because Z, along with the Latin letters V and O, was ostensibly used to mark Russian military equipment to avoid friendly fire. Since the beginning of the war, Russian media deliberately avoided the word war, substituting it with special military operation. The repetitive visual presence of military equipment bearing the Z in the news prompted Russian civilians to search for the letter's deeper meaning. This search ultimately led to the construction of a weaponized pro-war propaganda symbol that became widely used by the Russian public and government. This symbol quickly gained traction, with the public dubbing the war Special Operation Z on the most popular social media platforms in Russia, Telegram and VK. There, aggressive slogans and art related to the new symbols have become publicly sourced creation. The symbol Z received the most public attention. Although new, it carries a sentiment of Russia's heroic past of World War II. One of the primary symbols of that period was the St. George's ribbon. In today's Russia, it is perceived as a sign of bravery and victory. The orange and black scheme of an emerged symbol Z re-established the romanticized connections to a victoriously militaristic past. In 2022, the Russia-Ukraine war elevated the St. George's ribbon to a symbol of military glory, now legally protected in Russia with fines up to 3 million rubles and 3 years in prison for insulting or defacing it. Fascinatingly, the letter Z does not exist in the Russian alphabet. In social media slogans related to the invasion, the Latin Z is used as a substitute for the Russian Z, Russian Z. The slogan for a world without Nazism is laced with irony, as in its mission to denazify Ukraine, Russia itself demonstrates territorial expansion, power, and militarism. Z is omnipresent. One of the Ukrainian interviewees who is living under Russian occupation shared their experience. Everywhere I looked, I saw this symbol of the Russian army, the enemy, the symbol of evil. Numerous social media groups utilize the letter Z as a unifying symbol advocating for war. One such example is the VK Community Special Military Operation. Boasting over 100,000 members, it features Z in its complex avatar design. Its pinned post displays the image that you see on the right with the message, "Our case is just. The enemy will be defeated." Kremlin targets young Russians, calling them Putin's Generation Z. The largest VK community, titled Generation Z, counts more than 85,000 members. Its logo features a pristine white Z, pierced by a golden bullet. Support for the Russian army extends beyond online platforms. Public spaces are branded with the Z symbol on buildings and monuments, and Z-shaped flash mobs celebrate the army's achievements, forming a new visual tradition. V, which also marked the military equipment at the war's onset, first appeared in slogans substituting the Russian letter V for Latin V. One of the most popular slogans is "Strength in Truth." Of course, not all Russian passport holders align with the implications of the Z and V. Anti-war citizens have created a bumper sticker with the slogan, "Bring my husband back, I'm fucking tired." A year into the war in Ukraine, when the new symbol's pro-war connotation became ingrained in the minds of the Russian nation, the symbols shed their orange and black disguise, revealing the colors of the Russian flag. In December 2022, the letter V became a part of Christmas decoration in Moscow. For the first time, it crossed the border from the profane to the sacred. The letter V, styled in the Russian flag, made its way into the official design of the presidential election campaign in March 2024. Creativity was defeated by sheer brilliance of a single consonant. Who needs a design campaign when the campaign designs itself? The Russian word "vybory" is translated as voting, which conveniently starts with the V. The V might even have hinted at Vladimir Putin's initials. The letter O did not take center stage in Russian media, but served as a valuable component. In slogans, the Latin O substitutes the Russian O, which look identical. The pro-war population drew a parallel between ZVO acronym for Russia's Western Military District, making it a new symbol of militarism. Anti-war citizens responded by making fun of the letters, creating memes in which ZVO becomes a syllable. The vivid phrase "Zvanite v Durku" is translated as "call the madhouse." The final iteration of ordering the three letters coalesced themes of history, ideology, and a cult of personality into a powerful symbol Zov that no longer needed styling. When a Russian speaker reads Zov, they hear the word, which means to call and to cry for help, or voice of blood, feeling, or attraction due to long-standing family ties and origin. The third definition is the one that was tied to the symbol Zov. In this context, Russia heard the voice of blood that urged the country to save the Ukrainians with whom it shared long-standing ties. A vast number of VK communities incorporate Zov into their titles. The bio of the "I am with Putin" Zov community says, "Riposte is the best weapon in media." This message underscores users' awareness of utilizing language, images, slogans, and symbols as weaponry. In the Telegram chat Special Military Operation Zov, the avatar features three figures: a present-day soldier, a World War II soldier, and an archetype from East Slavic legends. Together, they symbolize a fusion of pride and wars, united under the Russian flag. The use of the symbols has extended into clothing design. Wildberries, Russia's largest online retailer, offers multiple t-shirts featuring Z, V, and Zov. The t-shirt on the left shows the slogan, "Truth is with us, God is with us." It is crafted in black letter typography, echoing the texture style famously used by Johannes Gutenberg for the first printed Bible. The Russian Orthodox Church lends support to the special military operation, requiring all parishes to recite a prayer that implores God to grant victory. While some find nourishment in the prayers, others tune in through a different frequency, the VK songs. In the song "I Hear Zov" by Killnet, the lyrics say, "I hear the calling of my motherland," and "I'm against Nazism." How is it that those who support extreme nationalism continue to believe they're fighting against the principles of Nazism? The Russian government has tightly controlled social media for a decade. Since the Ukraine invasion, almost all independent media outlets in Russia have closed, relocated, or been forced to shut down, creating an information bubble in Russia. With that, the Russian government disseminates misleading information, manipulates public opinion, and shapes militaristic ideology. This reality distortion leads citizens to perceive their actions as patriotic. The Kremlin censors unwanted information, isolating the country from the global internet. After a decade of brainwashing, Russia's citizens have internalized this propaganda so successfully that it has become a form of self-indoctrination. Consequently, the symbols have transformed into dangerous tools in the hands of the self-indoctrinated. The Z, O, and V symbols exile people from their homes. In 15 interviews with citizens of Ukraine in Russia, it became evident that both nations are now scattered worldwide. Ukrainians run from war, and Russians run from the regime. I see Z as an identifying mark that humans historically used to signify ownership by branding property and livestock. Today, people continue this practice by branding themselves and others. Z, O, and V, whether together or separately, with or without consent, hold power over minds, encode ideologies, and empower nationalism. Militaristic symbols such as Zov must be deconstructed and reshaped, and the identities associated with them must be redefined. While leaders such as Putin may eventually exit the political arena and symbols such as Zov might undergo modifications, the dangerous ideologies they foster will persist through generations. Passivity is not an option. We must not permit these symbols to be used as tools of division, aggression, and oppression. Thank you for your attention, and let's continue this conversation.
Give it up for Elle. Thank you.
My garage door activation key is meant to provide easy access in and out of our parking garage, but the delayed activation and the sounds are often off-putting as I wait for the door to open or close. Public restroom hand dryers are bewildering at best and wasteful, even useless at worst. Most, warm air-blowing vents, high-tech jets, even fancy terry cloth mini towels, fail to provide efficient alternatives to tapping wet hands on trousers. Yet one design stands out against the chaos. The paper towel dispensers from Brazilian firm Melhoramentos, stating, "Hands softly dried in 2 sheets." They provide an elegantly succinct verbal behavior nudge that is one of Brazil's finest contributions to global interface design.
Our alums are such talented writers. Next up, we have our second to last presentation by Maxwell Lent, Safety in the Synagogue, the Intersection of Hospitality and Security in the 21st Century. Give it up for Maxwell.
Hi, thank you for coming. Let's start off.
I stepped off the bus in Mobile, Alabama. The sun was slowly setting on the bay. It was 6 o'clock on a summer
The song you just heard, part of it at least, tells a story that can never happen today. A minyan is a quorum of 10 men required to say certain prayers, and the minyan man, a stranger to the Jews of Mobile, is a sort of mythical figure who completes the quorum for Shabbat services. The bond between the two men in the song is a sense that each man looked the same way too. These two men recognized each other based on the appearance alone, which was enough to bring the stranger to the synagogue. This was how synagogues in the United States operated for as long as Jews have been in America. Looking like you belonged was as much security as any synagogue ever needed, even during periods of discrimination and persecution. Minyan Man embodied something special about attending synagogue. The synagogue would always welcome any Jew for an authentic Jewish experience, and the idea of turning that kind of person away is unheard of. However, it is slowly becoming a reality here in the United States. The catalyst for the shift away from fully welcoming synagogues is the perceived and actual threats facing synagogues in the United States. In 2018, a shooter entered the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh and killed 11 congregants. In 2022, a man entered a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, and took congregants hostage for 11 hours. And in 2019, a gunman entered a synagogue in Poway, California, killing one congregant and injuring 3 others. The threats posed to synagogues are serious. However, most anti-Semitic incidents come in less life-threatening forms. Recently, they have included graffiti, harassment, and fake bomb threats. Synagogues are the site of expression of Jewish pride, and security is turning those expressions of pride inside out. In that vein, many synagogues have recently invested in beefing up security, including more armed guards. People are frightened and feel the need to do something about it, which has widely manifested in an increased external appearance of its security. Synagogues are community centers, and the look the same way too approach is much more welcoming than the intimidating security. In this research, I've explored the dynamic and interaction between increased security and openness of synagogues. To help explore this dynamic, I've created this matrix to map out how the security mechanisms employed on a scale from invisible to visible impact the openness of a synagogue on a scale from unwelcoming to welcoming. Invisible means something not seen at all, or something that is seen, but the security benefits are unseen, while visible is something that perceptively shows a security purpose. Welcoming and unwelcoming keep their classic meaning. How likely is this synagogue measure to make a prospective congregant feel welcome or unwelcome in the space? I ultimately propose crisis architecture as the paradigm for security. Crisis architecture is a framework to help create spaces where security infrastructure is incorporated into the design of the space rather than retrofitted on. The idea is that the more the occupants of a space see security features, the more anxious they get about security, and the more security is beefed up to make people feel safer, and the vicious cycle continues. In fact, scholars have hypothesized that a place of worship's perception of future victimization risk showed a significant positive association with the presence of security measures and can help explain why congregations seemingly react irrationally to perceived future threats. Crisis architecture directly downplays the markers of beefed up security and therefore downplays the fear. Second Amendment tats is a term coined by Rabbi Daniel Beauregard of Central Reformed Congregation, St. Louis, Missouri. He says that there will always be some trade-off when it comes to paying for guard presence and security. He was referring to the financial trade-off of security for community programming, but the trade-off can take many forms, and retrofitted security measures can cost congregations more when not factored into original building costs. Coincidentally, his synagogue is a great example of crisis architecture. The benches surrounding the property, which you can see here, are actually bollards. They protect the building, but don't appear to be for security purposes. Congregation Beth Shalom, or CBS in Lawrence, New York, is a great example of how to be safe and welcoming. However, without any architectural interventions or crisis architecture, it ultimately must rely on external security infrastructure. CBS's security infrastructure starts out with the entrances. While the building has 2 entrances from the outside, the front entrance, which you saw on the last slide, is permanently locked. Instead, everyone must enter through the ADA-compliant main entrance at the back of the building. Crowd control is important here, since regular attendees for Saturday services can number in the hundreds, not to mention the hundreds more that might show up to use the ballroom, which the synagogue rents out for events. There are always 2 or 3 plainclothes security guards around the property. You can see them here in this Google Street View image. They're the 2 men wearing suits at the bottom. There is no fence around the property. Staunch opponents said it would make the place look like a jail. In any case, the guards see each person entering the building, and they'll be on the radar of the congregant-run security team, which is on the lookout for things out of the ordinary on the inside. This laid-back approach is possible for two reasons. First, Jews are heavily integrated into the fabric of the town and generally feel very safe there. Where people feel unsafe in the broader community, they may implement greater security, which will amplify feeling unsafe and lead to even more unnecessary security. Second, the security team has enough authority within the community to assuage people's fears. The congregation's trust in them is extremely strong. One former congregation president told me that he had no issue with any increase in security if the security team felt it was necessary. To date, they have actively fought to beef up security. Further, the security team's mandate is to keep the peace and help in medical emergencies rather than to repel outsiders. So I will put CBS here on the matrix. The security is visible, the show of force is minimal, and the synagogue remains welcoming. Central Reformed Synagogue congregation goes in invisible and welcoming because the security features blend into the background and do not deter potential congregants from entering. Moving on, European fortress synagogues were allegedly built in the style of military fortresses, effectively keeping congregants in and enemies out. I say allegedly because the truth is that the fortress look was just a stylistic choice. The fortress synagogue legend persists because, as Vlad Levin puts it, it unites two contrasting notions, the notion of peaceful prayer and divine service, and the notion of armed struggle. This is the epitome of visible and unwelcoming, as the walls keep outsiders out, which is unwelcoming by definition, and the walls are clearly part of the security apparatus. American synagogues recently picked up on the idea of fortress synagogue by increasing imposing security measures. Synagogues have implemented at least one of the security options listed here, sometimes employing several incongruous methods, all from different quadrants on the matrix. As one security expert put it, security features bolted on after the fact often look fortress-like and emphasize that the potential threat is high, eliciting an emotional fear response that can have negative impacts on performance productivity. To illustrate this concept, this is a recent synagogue constructed in Englewood, New Jersey. The design sought to eliminate the boundaries between indoors and outdoors, make the space more welcoming to congregants. Here is the as-built design. Here is the building with a fence added a few years later for increased security and exclusivity. This fence happens to be non-intimidating, but other congregations have proposed adding fences ranging from what we see here to imposing walls. The academic literature heavily focuses on security as a mind game. In one work, the author explored security in the post-9/11 world and found an increased level of anxiety about security. Astutely, they asked, at what point does a reaction to a threat become excessive or even delusional? And then there's the impact of world events on American synagogues since the Hamas attack on October 7th. I heard this repeatedly from my interviewees who expressed that Jewish communities in the U.S. are more unsafe than ever before. Whether this is reality is besides the point. Congregations are now feeling pressure, acting accordingly, and adding to communal anxiety. Every institution, Jewish or otherwise, grapples with these issues. For example, public libraries are accessible to all and have minimal but visible security. Schools restrict entry to certain people, and gyms restrict entry to paying customers. Based on their unique function, all these spaces must consider how to balance inclusivity and security. As for the potential risks that would require heightened security, the truth is the stakes are high in life. Attending synagogue is risky, but so is attending public school, given recent school shootings, and driving a car, given driving death rates. For synagogues, the stakes are perfectly encapsulated in this quote. Adding to the agony, I opened the doors of my synagogue and unknowingly welcomed the individual who would later attack me and my fellow congregants. That I opened the door will always weigh heavily on me. Still, I remain committed to the idea of welcoming and caring for the stranger and living that value. So what can we do? Unfortunately, I have no clear answer, but what has become clear to me is that increased security, or the increased feelings of security, isn't the only answer, and it is time to intentionally explore the options and tailor the approach for each synagogue. The song Minion Man ends with the idea that its story is no longer possible. While thankfully synagogues are thriving, the atmosphere that the song is so nostalgic about could be wiped away entirely if nothing is done to change the trajectory towards Fortress Synagogue. Thank you.
Give it up for Maxwell. I've been coming up with this thing to say that the projector is being the chaos agent, which is very clever. It was, yeah, I think we can fix this, right? Yeah, it's going to take about 3 to 5 minutes, so if you can... Oh, 3 to 5. Oh, so I'm doing... Okay, yeah, we have one more presentation. Olivia's presentation is draw dropper, showstopper. So please stick around. We're just gonna do a little tech check. As you saw, there was just a little flashing that was raising the anxiety for all of us.
So I'm restarting it right now. I'm trying a different input too. Yeah, of course. But okay, I'll let Bobby know. So, and then this one, I had to restart the laptop, and it's saying an error code. Contact your IT. Should I just shut it down and try again? Oh wait, that's right. It's our laptop. Yeah. We've just had other thesis presentations, and it's been other laptops. So. Kim for Bobby, can you silence the podium mic? I'm gonna...
I curse the push alert. Even though I know
Okay.
I can turn.
Take your seats. I think we have one more coming. I think maybe, can we advance the slide or does Brooke have to do that?
I curse the push alert. Even though I know I can turn them off. One moment you're focused and in the zone, and the next thing you know, you're in a Wikipedia rabbit hole because someone famous died.
The sticker burr, also known as stickle burr, that rears its ugly, spiky head in the tall, gentle grasses native to Texas hill country, always seems to sneak its way painfully between your barefoot toes. The thorny burrs are villainous at first encounter, but once the pain passes, a quick moment of reflection may right our perspectives to the orders of this ecosystem. The burrs as chaotic reminders of presence may in fact be a useful dose of humility.
And without further ado, we have Olivia Trabish presenting The Eyes of Texas, Interstate Surveillance and Bodily Autonomy in Amarillo.
Hi, thank you everyone. My name is Olivia Trabish. I'm glad you all have a drink. Wiggle your toes. My content is a little bit intense, so I just want you to feel it in your body, and I'm doing that reminder to myself as well. So today I'm going to talk to you about my research on interstate surveillance and bodily autonomy. I want to begin with this monument, patients created in the bathroom of a Planned Parenthood in Florida. Its 6-week abortion ban went into effect 2 weeks ago. Amongst the messages written on the walls are sentiments like this one. Characteristic of people who traveled many hours from other southern states to receive critical care. I traveled 5 hours because of laws in my state. My body, my choice, we matter. Traveling long distances to access abortion care is something pregnant people from the Panhandle of Texas have understood for a long time. Before Roe was overturned in 2022, people from Amarillo, noted here by this red dot, had to drive over 300 miles to access abortion care. Despite having as many as 18 Planned Parenthoods in the region in the 1980s, no local clinic would perform abortions. After Roe was overturned 2 years ago, the complete lack of access that had long been the reality of people from the Panhandle became the reality for all Texans. The reason Amarillo did not have local access to an abortion clinic is because it's a transportation corridor. This sounds counterintuitive. Yes, people with uteruses could get on the interstate to gain access to care, but the reason Amarillo didn't have a clinic that would perform abortions locally was because of federal statutes that regulated women's bodies built into its surrounding highways. Amarillo is surrounded by highways because it's home to Pantex, the only production facility for assembling and disassembling atomic bombs in the United States. In the weeks following Pearl Harbor, highways in the region were expanded and reconfigured to transport military equipment. This persisted throughout the Cold War. Abortion became legal during that time, but Amarillo embodied the qualities of its built environment, expansionism and evangelicism, two forces equally prominent in shaping the surveillance of American highways today. In 1873, Congress deputized anti-vice and Puritan crusader Anthony Comstock to suppress the circulation of women's health literature on America's postal roads. This piece of legislation became known as the Comstock Act. 50 years later, in 1916, Congress passed its first federal act to expand postal roads into highways. This linked the surveillance of women's bodies to highways and interstates. As highways expanded, the first birth control clinic opened later that year. Here's a photo of it with mothers clamoring outside with their baby carriages. The clinic shuttered within 10 days under the surveillance apparatus Comstock had created. Congress eventually removed references to contraception in the act in 1971, but maintained the link between the Postal Service, highways, and abortion surveillance. Today, anti-abortion activists and MAGA Republicans are using that remaining link as a potential backdoor to a federal abortion ban. Later this month, this group of men will vote on a petition to make Amarillo a sanctuary city for the unborn. This petition ordinance uses Comstock as the legal basis to institute further abortion restrictions on top of the state's abortion ban. The ordinance prohibits the use of medication abortion and interstate travel for abortion. If someone is suspected of getting an abortion, anyone who assists them, either by delivering mail, driving them, funding them, or providing care, is subject to an unlimited number of prosecutions and fines. This ordinance not only takes away the rights of pregnant people and the people who help them procure life-saving health care, but it effectively bans the actual transport of pregnant bodies. Comstock utilized postal roads and then highways as a tool to mediate control, and then highways became the defining organizing principle of the 20th century. This affected both abortion access and regulation. By the time the national system of interstate and defense highways was complete in 1992, 1.4 million American women procured legal abortions each year. Historically, this number has remained constant, whether abortion is legal or not. What decreases are the number of suicides, homicides, and healthcare-related deaths when abortion is legalized. Crisis pregnancy centers are another tool of surveillance organized around the road. I will refer to them in shorthand in my presentation as CPCs. And at CPCs, the well-being of birthing people generally does not matter. They set up next to abortion clinics, sometimes inside the same building as an abortion provider, or now in the offices of closed abortion providers, to deceive people and prevent them from obtaining abortions. Robert Pearson, the author of How to Start and Operate Your Own Pro-Life Outreach Crisis Pregnancy Center, founded the first CPC in the United States in 1967. His manual begins by comparing CPCs to car dealerships. A car dealer, when he's advertising, does not list the things his auto won't do, so why should we say we don't do abortions? In his seminal text that inspired much of the anti-abortion movement, Pearson advised anti-abortion activists to choose neutral-sounding names and show women a slideshow that includes misinformation about the health risks of abortion. A sample script for CPC volunteers was included in Pearson's manual. Question: do you do abortions? Answer: anything you need, we do here. Question: I want to have an abortion. Will you help me? Answer: we have so many ways to help a woman and will gladly help you. Have you had a test? We'll be glad to do one for you. According to abortion historian Dr. Jennifer Holland, CPCs exist primarily to increase the birth rate in white communities. However, they also target predominantly black and brown neighborhoods so that white volunteers can victimize the non-white people they assist, while also casting white people as personal saviors. While CPCs proliferated in the late 60s and the 2000s, they operated on shoestring budgets. That changed shortly after 9/11 under George W. Bush's presidency. Federal grants doubled and tripled CPC annual operating budgets to promote abstinence-only education. By 2022, when Roe fell, CPCs recorded $1.4 billion in revenue and $344 million in government funding. Texas now runs the largest alternative to abortion program in the United States. Over $140 million in state funding has been diverted from federal temporary assistance programs for low-income families to crisis pregnancy centers. And new CPCs are well-funded and intentionally camouflaged, like this one, on West Texas A&M University's campus in the middle of public student housing. Its painfully white, new-build aesthetic and gentrified sign does not refer to its address or zip code. It refers to Bible verse 1330 from the Old Testament. Go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. Advertisements celebrating 1330's grand opening are visible from the interstate, not too far from the Prohibit Abortion Trafficking billboard of the Sanctuary City for the Unborn campaign. 1330 fronts as a Christian coffee shop, but it's an extension of Hope and Choice, a crisis pregnancy center affiliated with CareNet, the second largest anti-abortion organization in the United States, founded by the Christian Action Council in 1975. At 13:30, girls are discreetly tested for pregnancy, provided an ultrasound and prayer intervention, and given, quote, the choice to become hopeful about their pregnancy. If we zoom out and just look at a map of Texas, particularly closed abortion clinics, which are displayed here as little tombstones because there are 0 operating clinics left in the state, and crisis pregnancy centers, or CPCs, depicted here as stars or asterisks, CPCs are clearly pervasive and concentrated in city centers that used to provide abortion care, in the same places highway construction decimated communities of color through urban renewal campaigns using eminent domain. Nationally, CPCs now outnumber abortion providers 4-1. When we layer in highways, just focusing on highways coming out of Amarillo in this image, as well as rest stops, which are another point of surveillance I unpack more in my thesis, along with sanctuary city ordinances depicted here in brown and yellow for Amarillo's proposed legislation, we get a severely dizzying image of tangible surveillance, all born from systems of highway infrastructure. This presents 2 options for pregnant people: compulsory motherhood or criminalization. More than 60% of all abortions today happen through medication abortion, whether self-managing with the guidance of an abortion doula or traveling hundreds of miles to a clinic. The increased demand for care on a shrinking number of clinics translates to pregnant people paying thousands of dollars to self-administer in hotel rooms, near clinics. This is not too dissimilar from the roadside underground market of the 60s. The risk of death is less imminent, but the risk of criminalization is unprecedented. The citizen enforcement mechanism of these pieces of legislation are the most terrifying component. Here's a live feed of Interstate 40 in Amarillo streaming on the Texas Department of Transportation website. Any citizen can camp out, digitally or physically, to record the movements of suspected abortion traffickers. Hotlines staffed by elderly women who lost friends to botched abortions used to accompany people across state lines. Their phones are quiet now. They haven't received a single request for accompaniment since the sanctuary city ordinance legislation was introduced last year. Pregnant people are cutting off contact with their families and trusted community members to lower the risks of criminalizations to themselves and to the people that they love. In some cases, never mentioning their pregnancy and abortion until the person who got them pregnant dies. A few cases against women have been brought by the nurses who helped them. Most have been brought by ex-husbands and boyfriends. The settler geographies and ontologies of highways and the broader forces they gave shape to are diminishing our access to reproductive health care today. And now 6 million people with uteruses of reproductive age across the United States will drive a minimum of 200 miles to access critical health care. But us girls and non-binary people from Amarillo are rising up in solidarity with people in Palestine and across the world suffering at the hands of the American empire and its infrastructure. In Amarillo cafes and thrift shop bathrooms are repro kits concealed in takeout bags, which you see here, equipped with condoms, Plan B, and a guide to abortion pilsine, put together by Texans who've had abortions, helped people access abortion, and trust people know what is best for themselves. I have copies of the zine here with me tonight. Please come find me if you would like one. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Worth sticking around for. Before we head out, we have some closing remarks from Molly Heinz. Give it up for Molly.
Okay, could I ask the rest of the class of 2024 to come on up? And while they are doing that, Olivia, come back. I just want to mention that Olivia is receiving the SVA Paula Rhodes Medal from our department. This is an honor that yes. This is an honor that SVA asked us to bestow on an outstanding graduate student. And Olivia, the faculty have nominated you for this award for your thesis work as well as for your engagement with the program throughout the whole year. So through your work, you're demonstrating the possibilities and power of design research. So congratulations. All right, so now back to that so what question that I brought up at the beginning. And in the words of my 4-year-old, I'll just say, that's what. Yeah, so congratulations, class of 2024. All right, so thank you all for coming this evening, and I hope you'll join us in the lobby for some celebratory drinks and toasting and to chat more with our MA graduates. So congratulations, everybody.
And grab a copy of the book, Chaos Agents.
Yes.
In the lobby.
Chaos Agents, pick up your copy. I think we have enough for everybody. All right, let's do it.